Ethan had been on many missions before, but this one felt different. The alien planet, Voron Prime, stretched beneath the cold light of twin suns. The ground was cracked and barren, with jagged rocks scattered like the ruins of some ancient battle. Smoke rose from distant craters, and the faint hum of alien engines echoed through the air. He kept his senses sharp. Every step could bring danger. He crouched behind a jagged rock, scanning the landscape. His team had been ambushed days ago, and he was now alone, navigating through enemy territory. The Voron were fierce, intelligent, and unpredictable. Their ships moved with fluid precision, and their soldiers were strong and fast, equipped with armor that gleamed like black metal. Humanity had faced many alien species, but the Voron had a reputation that made even the bravest soldiers cautious. Ethan adjusted his pack and checked his weapon. It was an old model, a pulse rifle that had been modified countless times. It was reliable, and that was all he needed. He had to complete this mission alone: reconnaissance, report enemy positions, and, if possible, rescue any humans still trapped. As he moved carefully along a cracked ridge, he noticed something strange. There was a small figure moving slowly among the wreckage of what appeared to be a Voron village. Smoke curled from destroyed buildings, and the air smelled of scorched metal and ozone. At first he thought it was a scout, an enemy soldier. But then he saw it was a child. A small Voron child, its limbs shaking, its skin pale with dust, its large amber eyes wide with fear. Ethan's heart tightened. He had been trained to face enemies without hesitation, but this was different. A child did not belong on a battlefield. A child deserved protection. He moved silently, keeping low. The child was trapped under a collapsed metal beam, struggling to free itself. Each movement seemed to cause it pain, and the sounds it made were small, frightened whimpers. Ethan scanned the area. No immediate threats, but the Voron patrols were always nearby. He had seconds, maybe less, to act. He sprinted forward, careful to keep his approach quiet. The child looked up at him, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Ethan spoke softly. "It's okay. I'm here to help. You're safe now." The child's eyes darted around, unsure, then back to him. Ethan reached the beam. It was heavy, but with careful leverage he managed to lift it just enough for the child to crawl out. The child hesitated, then scrambled to Ethan's side. Its small hands clung to his armor, and Ethan felt a surge of responsibility. "Come on, we need to move," he whispered, scanning the surroundings again. He kept one eye on the horizon while supporting the child. As they moved toward a safer ridge, a shadow passed overhead. Ethan froze. A Voron scout ship hovered, scanning the area. Its sensors could detect movement, heat signatures, everything. He pressed the child down behind a rock, holding his breath. The ship moved slowly, humming, then drifted away. Ethan exhaled quietly. They had only moments before another patrol appeared. He continued moving, careful and deliberate, keeping the child close. Every now and then he would glance at the child, who seemed to understand the urgency, staying quiet and still. He could feel the child's small body trembling against his armor. Ethan's mind raced. He had to get the child somewhere safe. Returning to the human base was impossible. The area was controlled by Voron forces. Then he remembered an abandoned outpost he had passed earlier. It was small, partially destroyed, but it could serve as temporary shelter. He led the child there, scanning constantly. The path was treacherous, broken bridges, sharp rocks, deep fissures in the ground. But Ethan's military training guided him. He calculated each step, keeping the child protected. Finally, they reached the outpost. It was dark inside, filled with debris, but at least it offered cover. Ethan set the child down gently. The child looked around, wide-eyed, then back at him. "Stay here. Don't move," he instructed. "I'll check the area and make sure it's safe." The child nodded, though it was silent. Ethan moved cautiously through the outpost, listening for any signs of enemy presence. There were noises, small creatures scuttling, the wind whistling through broken walls, but no patrols. For now they were safe. Ethan returned to the child, crouching beside it. "Okay, we're safe for now, but we can't stay here long," he said. "Do you understand?" The child nodded again, gripping his arm tightly. Ethan looked into those wide amber eyes and felt something unexpected, a sense of connection. He didn't know the child's name, didn't know its story, but he knew he couldn't leave it behind. Humanity had fought wars for survival, but in this moment, survival meant saving life, not taking it. Hours passed as they stayed in the outpost. Ethan shared what little food he had, and the child ate quietly. The silence was broken only by the occasional distant hum of alien engines. Ethan's mind raced. He knew that Voran patrols would eventually search this area. Staying put too long would be dangerous. He needed a plan. He remembered a natural canyon to the east, a place where patrols rarely went because of its treacherous terrain. If he could reach it, he could hide the child until they figured out the next step. He explained the plan to the child in simple words. "We're going to move at night. It's safer then. You need to stay close to me, okay?" The child nodded. Ethan prepared for the journey. He checked his weapon, ensured his supplies were ready, and studied the map etched in his mind from previous reconnaissance. The night on Voran Prime was cold, but it offered cover. He wrapped the child in a small thermal blanket, keeping it close. As darkness fell, they moved. The terrain was difficult. Sharp rocks cut through gloves, jagged cliffs tested their balance, but Ethan guided the child carefully. Several times he had to leap across small chasms, carrying the child with him. Each step was measured, each movement calculated. He could feel the child's fear, but also a growing trust. Hours later, they reached the canyon. It was dark, deep, and narrow, perfect for hiding, but dangerous if one misstep was made. Ethan led the child down carefully, finding a small alcove where they could rest. He settled them both in the shadows, listening intently. The sounds of the alien world were everywhere, creatures moving, wind whistling, distant metallic hums. But for now, they were alone. Ethan looked at the child and whispered, "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." The child's eyes reflected a mixture of fear and relief. It clung to him, tiny hands gripping his armor. In that moment, Ethan realized something important. Saving this child was more than duty, it was a choice. A human choice to protect life even in the heart of enemy territory. As they rested, Ethan planned their next steps. He knew the Voran mother would come looking, driven by instincts and love. And he knew that when she arrived, everything would change. For now, though, he held the child close, ready for whatever came next. The night on Voran Prime stretched on, silent except for the whispers of wind and distant alien sounds. Ethan stayed vigilant, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers. But he also knew something powerful had begun. A connection that crossed species, a bond forged in the crucible of war and the simple, human act of saving a child. For the first time in days, Ethan allowed himself a moment of hope. They had survived the first night, and somehow that small victory felt like the beginning of something much larger. The first light of dawn barely touched the jagged cliffs of Voran Prime when Ethan woke. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of burnt metal from distant ruins. The child stirred beside him, yawning and stretching, but not leaving his side. Its small hand found Ethan's, gripping tightly. Ethan gave a reassuring squeeze. They had survived the night, but now came the greater challenge, facing the child's mother. He had expected her to arrive. Any parent would. The Voran were known for their loyalty to family, and he had no doubt that the mother would be relentless. Ethan studied the canyon walls, looking for signs, scars in the rock, disturbed sand, anything that could indicate approaching danger. He spoke softly to the child. "We need to stay quiet and stay low. If she finds us, don't panic. Understand?" The child nodded, eyes wide but trusting. Ethan had seen enough combat to know that fear could paralyze a person, or a child. He would need to keep the child calm, focused, and safe. Hours passed in tense silence. Ethan whispered to the child stories of home. Faraway mountains, green forests, flowing rivers. It was strange to speak of such things in a place so alien and harsh, but he knew that comfort could come from memory, even if it was someone else's world. The child listened intently, occasionally asking small questions which Ethan answered in gentle tones. Then, without warning, the ground trembled slightly, and a shadow swept over the canyon. Ethan froze, his hand tightening on the child's. The Voran mother had arrived. She was massive, taller than any human, with sleek, dark armor that shimmered under the weak sunlight. Her amber eyes scanned the canyon like twin searchlights, locking onto Ethan and the child almost instantly. She did not attack immediately. She paused, evaluating. Ethan could see the conflict in her posture. Anger mixed with uncertainty, rage tempered by relief that her child was unharmed. Ethan remained still, hands raised slightly in a gesture of peace. "Stay close to me," he whispered to the child. The child instinctively moved behind him as if hiding beneath a shield. The Voran mother, Lyra, spoke in a low, resonant voice, her language alien to human ears. Ethan could not understand the words, but the tone was clear, commanding, protective, and filled with emotion. He raised his voice carefully, speaking slowly in universal human tones, hoping to convey his intentions. I saved your child. I did not harm it. I only wanted to keep it safe. Lyra's eyes narrowed, scanning his face and posture. She did not relax, but she did not attack either. Ethan realized that they were at a fragile standoff, where a single wrong move could ignite violence. He kept his movements deliberate, measured, and non-threatening. The child, sensing tension, whimpered softly. Ethan knelt down to meet its gaze, holding it close. It's okay. She's your mother. I'm not here to fight. Just stay calm. Lyra approached slowly, each step deliberate, her eyes never leaving the child. Ethan could see her muscles tense, ready to spring if needed. But instead of attacking, she stopped a short distance away, observing. Ethan's heart raced. He knew that in the alien world, respect and caution were sometimes stronger than aggression. Hours passed with a tense quiet. Lyra did not leave, but she did not move closer. Ethan and the child remained crouched in the shadows of the canyon, aware that any sudden move could provoke a reaction. Finally, Ethan decided to act. He stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. I need to move, he said calmly. I cannot stay here forever. I want to return your child safely, but we cannot do that if the other patrols arrive. Lyra's eyes flickered with understanding, though her expression remained unreadable. She did not speak, but she shifted slightly, a silent acknowledgement that she was listening. Ethan took a deep breath. He needed a plan that respected her authority, while keeping both himself and the child safe. He gestured toward a narrow path leading out of the canyon. We can move together, he said. I will not harm your child. You can guide us. There is a safer place ahead where we can wait and plan. No one else will be in danger there. Lyra's amber eyes studied him intently. There was hesitation, a clash of instincts. Trust versus caution, pride versus necessity. Slowly, she gave a subtle nod. A signal that Ethan recognized immediately. They would move together, but under her watchful eye. The journey was treacherous. The canyon walls were jagged with loose rocks and sudden drops. Ethan led carefully, the child holding onto him, while Lyra followed close behind, her presence a constant reminder of the stakes. The silence was almost tangible, broken only by the occasional shift of rocks beneath their feet or the whisper of wind through the canyon. Ethan observed Lyra from time to time. Her movements were precise, controlled, and elegant even in such harsh terrain. He could see her strength and agility, and he realized that this was not just a mother protecting her child. It was a warrior, trained and disciplined, capable of great speed and power. Yet, despite that, she allowed him to move alongside her, a human in her territory. That was remarkable. Hours later, they reached a natural plateau, a flat area that offered a temporary safe zone. Ethan gestured to the child to rest, and he did the same. Lyra did not sit, standing watchfully, scanning the horizon. The child crawled to Ethan, resting its small head against his side. Ethan gently stroked its hair, feeling a strange warmth. You're safe for now, he whispered. We will figure this out together. Lyra's eyes softened slightly as she watched him. Ethan sensed a shift. Her suspicion remained, but there was also respect. He had risked his life to save her child, and that could not be ignored. In a silent way, she acknowledged his courage, even if her pride would never let her admit it aloud. As they rested, Ethan thought about their next steps. The child's safety was paramount, but he also had to consider his own position. They were deep in enemy territory. Any movement could trigger an encounter with Voran patrols, or worse, other human forces unaware of the situation. He needed a plan that kept them all alive. Listen, he said softly, addressing Lyra as best as he could. He used gestures and simple words. We need to move. There is a safer place ahead. I will follow your guidance. You keep the child safe. We do this together. Lyra tilted her head, considering. Finally, she stepped closer, signaling with her hands that she understood. It was not an agreement of friendship, but a truce of necessity. Ethan nodded. That was all he needed. They set off again, moving carefully across the plateau. The child stayed close to Ethan, sometimes glancing at Lyra, who kept a watchful eye but allowed them some space. Ethan spoke softly to the child. keeping it calm with gentle words, stories of home, and quiet reassurances. The child responded with quiet trust, a bond forming that transcended species. The day wore on, and as the sun dipped toward the horizon, they found a shallow cave that offered temporary shelter. Ethan checked the perimeter, ensuring it was secure while the child rested. Lyra did not speak, but her presence was constant, a protective figure who monitored every movement. Ethan realized that while they were technically enemies, their goals had aligned. For now, survival required cooperation. Night fell, and the alien sky shimmered with stars. The twin moons cast pale light over the cave. Ethan shared some of his supplies with the child, who ate quietly, exhausted from the long day. Lyra remained standing outside the cave, her silhouette outlined by the moonlight. Ethan respected her vigilance. She was not here to harm them, but neither would she allow recklessness. As he settled beside the child, Ethan reflected on the events of the day. Saving the child had been a simple act of humanity, yet it had changed everything. He was now in uncharted territory, literally and figuratively. Lyra's presence was a constant reminder of the complexities of interspecies conflict, of loyalty, and of trust earned through actions rather than words. He whispered to the child one last time before sleep claimed them both. "Tomorrow we move again. Stay close. Trust her and trust me. We will make it through." The child murmured softly, eyes closing, and Ethan felt a quiet determination settle in his chest. The journey ahead would be dangerous, filled with unknown challenges. But he knew this: protecting life, even an enemy's child, was the choice that defined him as human. And for Lyra, the alien mother, that simple act would plant a seed of respect that could grow into something far more powerful than war, a possibility of understanding, of alliance, and of shared hope. The night on Voron Prime was silent, save for the distant hum of alien engines and the soft whispers of the wind through the canyon. But in that stillness, a fragile bond had formed, a promise of survival and a hint of what humanity could inspire. Even in the heart of an enemy world, tomorrow, the journey would continue, and the true test of trust, courage, and understanding would begin. The next morning, the canyon was bathed in pale sunlight. Ethan woke to the child's soft breathing beside him. The small face was peaceful for the moment, but he knew that peace would not last long. Lyra had been standing watch outside the cave all night, unwavering and alert. She did not speak, but her eyes followed every movement, every sound. Ethan could sense her vigilance, a constant reminder that he was still in her territory, still under her watch. He gently nudged the child awake. "Time to move," he whispered. "We have a long way to go, and it's safer if we stay ahead of patrols." The child nodded sleepily and followed his instructions, clutching his hand. Ethan gestured to Lyra, hoping to convey that they were ready to continue. Lyra studied him for a long moment. Then with a silent nod, she led the way. Her movements were fluid, confident, and precise. Ethan followed closely, the child held securely, moving through the rugged terrain with care. The journey was slow. The canyon floor was uneven with loose rocks and sudden drops. Small fissures and crevices made every step dangerous. Ethan relied on his instincts, guiding the child carefully, while Lyra scouted ahead, her sharp eyes scanning for threats. There was a strange rhythm to their movement. Ethan and the child following behind, Lyra leading. Each step a delicate balance of trust and caution. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher. Ethan's thoughts turned to their destination. There was a natural ravine not far ahead that could provide better shelter. If they reached it, they could plan the next stage of their journey, perhaps even find a place to hide from the Voron patrols. But the path there was treacherous. A wrong step could send them plummeting into the rocks below. Suddenly, a distant sound caught Ethan's attention, a low rumble, steady and unnatural. He froze, motioning to the child to stay quiet. Lyra stopped instantly, her head tilting, sensing the same thing. The rumble grew louder, echoing through the canyon. Ethan's pulse quickened. He had expected patrols, but this sounded different. Closer, larger, more dangerous. Without warning, a group of rogue Voron warriors emerged from a side canyon, moving quickly and silently. They were not part of the patrols. Their armor was darker, their movements aggressive. Ethan recognized them from previous intelligence. They were a rogue faction known for attacking indiscriminately. Both humans and Voron who stood in their way were considered threats. Ethan crouched behind a boulder, pulling the child close. he whispered. "Stay behind me. Don't make a sound. Understand?" The child nodded, wide-eyed but trusting. Lyra moved beside them, her presence imposing a silent shield. The rogue faction was larger than Ethan had expected. There were at least a dozen warriors armed and alert. Ethan quickly calculated their options. Fighting them head-on was dangerous, but hiding was equally risky. They could be discovered at any moment. He needed a strategy that used the terrain to their advantage. He noticed a narrow crevice nearby, barely wide enough for two people to pass. It led to a small ledge above the canyon floor. If they could reach it, they might be able to evade the rogues or gain a tactical advantage. Ethan gestured to Lyra, indicating the crevice. She understood immediately, signaling the child to follow closely. They moved cautiously, each step measured. Ethan took the lead with the child in his arms, Lyra close behind. The rogue warriors had not noticed them yet, but Ethan knew it was only a matter of time. Every snap of a rock underfoot, every shift of sand could reveal their position. Suddenly, a warrior's foot caught on a loose stone, sending a sharp sound echoing through the canyon. The rogues froze, scanning the area. Ethan froze too, holding the child tightly. Lyra tensed, ready to strike if needed. For a tense moment, neither side moved. Then slowly the rogues continued, having decided the sound was nothing. Ethan exhaled quietly, relief flooding him. They reached the crevice and began to climb carefully. The ledge was narrow, but it offered a better vantage point. From there, Ethan could see the rogues below, searching the canyon floor. He realized that the rogue faction would not give up easily. They were persistent and ruthless. He needed to act quickly. Ethan whispered to Lyra, using simple gestures. They needed to distract the rogues, create a path to move safely across the canyon. Lyra's eyes met his, and he saw understanding. She moved silently, picking up a large rock. With precise aim, she sent it rolling down the canyon floor, creating a loud clatter. The rogue warriors turned immediately, chasing the sound, giving Ethan and the child a chance to move further along the ledge. Step by step, they advanced, using shadows and rocks as cover. The child stayed close, holding Ethan's arm tightly. Ethan could feel its small heartbeat against his chest, a reminder of the responsibility he bore. Lyra stayed vigilant, scanning for threats, ready to strike if necessary. As they moved, Ethan spoke softly to the child. "Almost there, stay calm. You're doing great." The child nodded, trust shining in its eyes. He felt a surge of determination. He had come this far. He would not fail now. Finally, they reached a narrow bridge of rock spanning the canyon. Ethan tested it carefully. It was stable, but only barely. One misstep could send them plunging into the depths below. He took a deep breath and began crossing, the child in his arms. Lyra followed, her movements confident and controlled, guiding them both safely across. Halfway across, the rogue warriors noticed them. Shouts rang out, echoing through the canyon. Ethan increased his pace, moving carefully but quickly. The child clung tightly, eyes wide with fear, but Ethan's steady presence reassured it. Lyra leapt gracefully, landing beside them, ready to confront any attack. The rogues tried to follow, but the narrow bridge allowed only one at a time. Lyra struck swiftly, using her strength and agility to hold them back without causing serious injury. Ethan took advantage of the moment, moving the child to the far side of the bridge. Once across, they paused briefly, catching their breath. Ethan looked at Lyra. She nodded, silently acknowledging the teamwork that had saved them. Despite being enemies by nature, they had worked together to protect the child. The rogue warriors regrouped on the other side, frustrated and unable to pursue them further. Ethan led the group toward a natural ravine he had spotted earlier. It was deeper and more sheltered, a place where they could rest and plan without immediate threat. The child's small hand never left his, and Lyra followed closely, scanning the area with relentless focus. By late afternoon, they reached the ravine. It was perfect, a narrow entrance, high walls, and enough space to hide. Ethan set the child down gently. The child looked at him and smiled faintly, a small gesture of trust and gratitude. Ethan smiled back, feeling a sense of relief. Lyra stayed at the entrance, her eyes sharp, scanning the horizon. She had not spoken all day, but her actions spoke volumes. She had seen Ethan's courage, his intelligence, and his commitment to the child. Despite being enemies, he had proven himself worthy of respect. Ethan sat beside the child, speaking softly. "We're safe for now. You did great. Very brave." The child leaned against him, tired but relieved. Ethan could feel the small heartbeat slow, the tension easing. As the sun set, painting the ravine walls in shades of orange and red, Ethan thought about the future. They had survived the immediate threat, but the journey was far from over. Lyra would not allow him to leave easily, and the rogue faction was still out there. Every step forward would require trust, strategy, and courage. He glanced at Lyra, who was now crouched observing quietly. There was something in her eyes, respect, caution, and perhaps a hint of curiosity. Ethan realized that their relationship had shifted. They were no longer simple enemies. They were allies by necessity, bound together by the child's safety. Night fell over the ravine, and the child rested beside Ethan. He kept one hand on its small shoulder, feeling a sense of duty stronger than ever. Lyra remained at the entrance, standing guard, a silent sentinel against the unknown. Ethan whispered to the child one last time before sleep claimed them both. "Tomorrow we continue. Stay close, trust me and trust her. We will get through this together." The canyon was silent, save for the distant hum of alien engines and the whisper of wind through the rocks. But in that stillness, a fragile bond had solidified, a bond between human, alien, and child. It was a bond forged in courage, trust, and the shared goal of survival. Ethan knew the true test was still ahead. The rogue warriors would not give up, and Lyra's mistrust would not vanish overnight. But for now, they had survived, and that small victory was enough to keep hope alive. For Ethan, protecting the child was not just a mission, it was a matter of honor, a reminder of what it meant to be human. And for Lyra, the alien mother, it was the first step in recognizing that perhaps not all humans were enemies, and that courage and compassion could cross the boundaries of war and species. Tomorrow, they would face new challenges, but tonight they rested, bound together by circumstance, respect, and a fragile hope for what lay ahead. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the ravine, casting long shadows along the jagged rocks. Ethan woke to the soft rustle of the child stirring beside him. The small hands gripped his arm instinctively, as if seeking reassurance. Ethan smiled gently. They had survived the treacherous canyon, outmaneuvered the rogue warriors, and earned a fragile truce with Lyra, the Vorin mother. But he knew the hardest part was still ahead. Lyra stood at the ravine entrance, scanning the horizon. Her presence was imposing, a silent reminder that Ethan was still in her territory. Yet something in her posture had changed. She was no longer purely tense or hostile. There was respect in her stance, a subtle acknowledgement of what Ethan had done for her child. Ethan knelt beside the child, speaking softly. "Today we move again. But we have to be careful. There may be others out there." The child nodded, trusting him completely now. Ethan had earned that trust through action, courage, and patience. He was not just a human soldier. He was a protector, a guardian of life in the heart of enemy territory. They moved carefully through the ravine, the child holding Ethan's hand, and Lyra close behind. The path was narrow, with sharp rocks and uneven terrain. Every step required caution. Ethan could see the determination in Lyra's eyes. She would not allow harm to come to her child, but she also recognized the human's skill and courage. Hours passed, and the terrain became more open. In the distance, they could see the remnants of a Vorin settlement, partially destroyed but large enough to provide temporary refuge. Ethan knew it would be dangerous, but it also offered a chance to rest and plan. They approached slowly, using rocks and shadows as cover. As they neared the settlement, a sudden movement caught Ethan's eye. A group of rogue warriors appeared, far more organized and numerous than before. They had tracked them overnight, persistent and relentless. Ethan froze, signaling the child to stay behind him. Lyra moved into a defensive stance, her armor glinting in the sunlight. The rogue faction approached quickly, but Ethan had a plan. He whispered to Lyra, using gestures and simple words. They needed to use the settlement's ruins to their advantage. Lyra nodded, understanding immediately. Together, they led the child through narrow alleys, crumbling walls, and over fallen beams, keeping the rogues at bay while minimizing risk. Ethan noticed a central tower, partially intact. From there, they could see the entire area and plan their next move. He signaled to Lyra, and she led them toward it. The child clung to him tightly, and Ethan kept one hand firmly on the small shoulder, ensuring it remained calm. They reached the tower's base, but it was unstable. Ethan tested the structure carefully, ensuring it could hold them. Step by step they climbed, each movement deliberate. The rogue warriors had noticed their position and began to approach, but the narrow stairway slowed them down. Ethan whispered to Lyra, "We hold here. We can protect the child from above." Lyra positioned herself strategically, ready to confront any rogue who attempted to ascend. Ethan kept the child close, shielding it with his body. The first few warriors reached the stairs, but Lyra's precise strikes and intimidation forced them to retreat. Ethan marveled at her skill. She was not only a mother but a warrior, and her combination of strength, intelligence, and instinct made her a formidable ally. As the rogues regrouped, Ethan scanned the horizon. He realized they needed to end this confrontation quickly. The longer they stayed, the greater the risk. He whispered to Lyra, using gestures and simple words again. They needed to lure the rogues into a trap, using the terrain to their advantage. Lyra's eyes flicked toward a narrow canyon nearby. If they could push the rogues into it, the confined space would prevent them from using their numbers effectively. Ethan nodded, signaling the child to stay close. Together they descended carefully, moving toward the canyon entrance. Once in position, Ethan used a small device to create a loud noise at the opposite end, drawing the rogues' attention. They charged instinctively, seeing what they believed was an opportunity. Lyra struck swiftly, guiding the rogues into the narrow canyon. Ethan stayed close to the child, keeping it calm and protected. The strategy worked. The rogues, trapped in the confined space, were unable to coordinate effectively. Lyra and Ethan moved with precision, neutralizing the threat without causing unnecessary harm. Within minutes, the rogue faction was forced to retreat. Their persistence ended by strategy, courage, and cooperation. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. He glanced at Lyra, who now approached him cautiously. There was no hostility in her eyes. Instead, he saw recognition, an acknowledgement of his bravery, intelligence, and unwavering commitment to her child. He knelt beside the child, who hugged him tightly. "It's over," he whispered. "We're safe for now." The child smiled faintly, a mix of relief and trust. Ethan felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had faced danger, protected life, and earned the respect of an alien mother in a world far from his own. Lyra stepped closer, her voice low but firm, speaking in her own language. Ethan could not understand the words, but the tone was clear, commanding yet respectful. She extended her hand toward him, a gesture that transcended language. Ethan understood. She was acknowledging him not as an enemy, but as an ally. For the first time, Ethan felt a true connection with Lyra. Their journey had begun with distrust and caution, but now it had evolved into mutual respect. She had witnessed his courage, his compassion, and his intelligence, and he had seen her strength, her determination, and her unwavering devotion to her child. As the sun began to set, Ethan, Lyra, and the child found a small shelter within the ruins. Ethan shared his supplies with both Lyra and the child, and they rested together. For a brief moment there was peace, a rare, fragile peace in a world defined by conflict. Ethan spoke softly to Lyra, using simple words and gestures. "We can work together. The child is safe. We can find a way through this together." Lyra's eyes softened. She did not speak, but she nodded slightly, acknowledging the truth in his words. The child nestled between them seemed to sense the shift. There was trust, hope, and a faint sense of family, a bond that crossed species boundaries and the divisions of war. Night fell over the alien landscape. The twin moons cast pale light over the ruins, creating shadows that danced across the walls. Ethan kept one hand on the child, the other ready for any danger. Lyra remained alert, her senses sharp, but there was no hostility. They had survived the day, faced the greatest threats, and emerged stronger for it. Ethan reflected on everything that had happened. He had saved a life, faced enemies, and navigated a world of danger and uncertainty. But more importantly, he had shown the power of courage, compassion, and humanity. In the heart of the enemy's world, he had proven that even a human could inspire respect, cooperation, and trust. Lyra sat beside him finally, her eyes on the child. Ethan understood that she would not allow him to leave immediately, not out of hostility, but out of care, respect, and a recognition of what he had done. She was a mother, and he had protected her most precious treasure. That bond could not be broken easily. Ethan whispered to the child one last time before sleep. "We've come this far. We're safe, and no matter what happens, I will protect you." The child smiled faintly and rested against him. Lyra placed a hand on the child's shoulder, a silent acknowledgement that he was a protector, not a threat. For the first time, all three of them sat together, a small family forged in the crucible of survival and trust. The night was quiet, the wind whispering through the ruins. But Ethan knew the journey was not over. There would be more challenges, more threats, and more decisions that tested courage, wisdom, and compassion. Yet for now there was hope, a fragile but undeniable hope that humanity, even in an alien world, could make a difference. And as Ethan looked at Lyra, and the child sleeping peacefully, he understood something fundamental. Protecting life, showing courage, and acting with compassion could transcend boundaries, species, and worlds. Humanity's greatest strength was not just in technology or strategy. It was in the heart, in the ability to choose to do what was right, even when the odds were against them. The journey ahead would be difficult, but Ethan, Lyra, and the child would face it together, bound by trust, respect, and the simple act of saving a life. In the heart of the alien world, amidst danger and uncertainty, a new alliance had been forged. And it was stronger than any weapon, larger than any conflict, and brighter than the twin suns rising over Vorin Prime. The canyon was silent, except for the soft breathing of the child and the faint rustle of the wind. But in that silence there was a promise of survival, understanding, and a future that might yet be brighter than the past. And for Ethan, that was enough to keep moving forward.